Okay, Shez, we're back on the eve of the Chinese Grand Prix, but the sprint weekend has started. Before we get into our reaction from sprint qualifying, let's just quickly address this because we haven't talked about this all week. Unfortunately, yesterday, Eddie Jordan, a legendary F1 team owner, passed away at the age of 76. Now, there are probably a good handful of great memories of Eddie across the board. But I kind of know him for being synonymous with the sport here recently through his podcast, the Formula for Success podcast. But I've also known him to speak his mind in interviews that he did after his Formula One career sort of ended, if you will. It also ended with the fact that he had a team by his own name, Jordan, sold in 2005, now Aston Martin of today. And then most infamously, he was the one who gave the legendary Michael Schumacher his chance in
Yeah.
Formula One. So Eddie Jordan is sort of stuck to the hip with the sport, if you will, right, Chez? So this is a big, big loss. I had no idea that he had cancer, and maybe it was known in some circles. It certainly wasn't well known enough for someone like me who's further away geographically from him to have known that. But this is sort of a sad, sad day for us, isn't it?
Yeah, it sucks a little bit, doesn't it? He he did talk about it at length, I think, on his podcast with David Coulthard, Formula for Success, as you mentioned, and actually it was quite a powerful message that he gave out. And if anyone here is listening and they haven't heard what he was talking about, he told everybody about his diagnosis fairly early and made it quite clear that it's important to get yourself checked out. Don't take your health for granted. Don't be scared to go and see your doctor. It's and the fact that he was helping people through something that he was suffering with speaks a lot to the guy really, and how like where his heart was at. I think that's something really important, something
Yeah.
to cherish. But as you say, look, from my point of view, uh, I always enjoyed him as a pundit. I remember that he was the guy that broke the Lewis Hamilton to Mercedes news. Um, he was pretty outspoken on his own podcast. He brought about the coup of the century, bringing Adrian Newey across to Aston Martin. Brilliant stuff. But for me, like peak Jordan was him dancing down the pit lane, doing a little Irish jig when Damon Hill and Ralph Schumacher got a 1-2 at the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix to open Jordan's winning ticket. That was just pure joy. And even though you could see there was a bit of angst between the drivers, like there was nothing that was going to make Jordan look feel at all down about the result. He was so happy, and you could see that all of the work and the effort, the sweat, the blood, the tears, and getting sponsors and in sort of just getting by on a tiny little budget had finally paid off. It meant so much to him. It was so awesome to see that. That's always the memory that's going to stick with me. And ultimately, actually, my favourite season of Formula One as I was growing up was 1999. Ironic because I'm a Michael Schumacher fan. He was barely in it for that season. But I loved it because Jordan was suddenly right up there. I was a massive Heinz Harald Frentzen fan that season, and to see to see the yellow Benton and Hedges clad Jordan 199, man, what a beautiful car. And what a brilliant story for a tiny little team. It was peak Formula One for me. And what I'm gonna say is, thank you, Eddie, for the memories. That was, that's what got little 15-year-old Shez like properly hooked on
Oof.
Formula One. So yeah, I owe a lot
Yeah.
to Eddie Jordan for that.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks to see these stalwarts kind of passing away, right? And I said that I had no idea about his diagnosis. What I meant was that he carried himself along in a way that wouldn't make you feel like there was any kind of diagnosis in the back end. And I'm with you. And one of my favorite memories, Shaz, is him essentially scolding Stefano Domenicali, now the F1 president and CEO Stefano Domenicali, back in his Ferrari days when he did a whole swaparoo with team orders with Alonso and Massa there in 2010 in Germany. And I just kind of love that, right? I mean, you don't see a whole lot of analysis like that sort of goes straight to the face of the characters involved, right? We hear a lot about that in podcasts and sort of later on, and maybe in sort of passive aggressive ways. But Eddie kind of spoke his mind and shot from his hip, if you will, and that was really fun. I thought that was
Yeah,
peak F1 coverage in the pit lane, in my opinion,
yeah,
where you could just kind of go at the team principal, be like, you shouldn't have done that.
yeah. Absolutely love it. It's the kind of stuff that you and I, when we're talking to each other about
Correct.
analysis and reaction and all that, it's the stuff that we want to be able to say to people and ask these people, why the heck did you do that? What were you thinking?
Right.
He had the opportunity and he used it, and it was brilliant to get that unfiltered questioning, the really
Yeah.
tough questions,
Wow.
and then sitting there making people squirm. Absolutely brilliant, like peak
And
TV, as you say.
he also had the credibility to go at it, right? So it's
Yeah,
not it's
yeah.
not just any regular guy holding a mic. So tough loss. Condolences to the family and the Formula One family as well. Okay, Shez, that said, we did have a pretty exciting sprint qualifying. I kind of forgot how exciting sprint qualifying could be in its format. Like it felt like it went by really, really fast and there was just so much happening. But the end result of it that is that, Shez, you should be on cloud nine. You are the Nostradamus of not just this podcast, but anything ever in Formula One ever created in the history of podcasting or content creation. Because you, my friend, came on last week after last week's qualifying in Melbourne saying, well, actually, the data shows that Lewis Hamilton is doing pretty good relative to Charles Leclerc. And look, while I would have agreed with you back then, I did not see this coming necessarily this soon. I've held all along the fact that this would take some time, but that I would have to imagine a seven-time champion would figure it out as soon as he could. I didn't think it would be this weekend, but what did you make of the fact that Lewis put it on pole? Did you do a happy dance?
Mate, I was jumping up and down for joy in my head in at work this morning, because at 7:30 I am unfortunately just starting work, but I had a wry smile on my face that nobody else understood. But that's the fate of a Formula One fan amongst non-Formula One fans, Luddites, all of them. But yeah, it was great, man. I was super happy, and no less than Helmut Marko said that this was an outstanding achievement, especially against someone who is as great at qualifying as Charles Leclerc. And I will take that to the bank. Great fun. I was really, really happy with it. But you know what made me even happier was that Max Verstappen's up there on the front row with him. I cannot wait for tomorrow morning. Like, it's a 3 a.m. start for us here. And I'm going to be up. I'm going to be up watching that, because I cannot wait. It is going to be incredible.
I imagine you having Red Bull going through your veins, kind of, you put what is the line that you put in your whatever, all these terms, right? So
Non-stop IV Red Bull,
a
correct.
nonstop IV. That's it. I imagine you hooked up to the IV machine, just kind of pumping in Red Bull and whatever other energy drinks just to kind of keep yourself going.
I don't think I'm
Actually, I
going to
don't think
need
you need
them.
that. Yeah, you're not going to need it. Actually, you're not going to need it. You know what? That's the best part. It's not just the fact that Lewis Hamilton put it on pole, but he's got Max right beside him. I mean,
Oh, it's going
and
to
if
be so
you
much
had
fun.
told me what would be your pick, right? This would be the dream scenario, the two of them being on the front row. Maybe it's swapped out a little bit. But I think it's just so close, right, Ches? I mean, you just look at it, 1 through 4, they're all basically split by a hair, really, and there's really nothing there. So the fact that Lewis was able to put it, I think, is a great testament to, his own ability. But I also think there's something to be said about the fact that Ferrari didn't have too much time to think. And I think when they don't have enough time to think, they do that. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can go both ways really with Ferrari, can't it? But it seemed to work out. But I think a lot of this is down to tires, right? It really has been about how these cars switch on their tires, and then how they keep them alive over the course of the lap. And I mean, look, let's all come back down to earth. Ultimately, what's going to happen probably is Oscar Piastri in third, who also put in a decent lap, although with some mistakes, as did Lando Norris, is probably going to be in the best position to win the sprint race. Just because if you looked at FP1, which is actually the only free practice session that these guys are going to have, which is actually the best thing about the sprint weekend, I think. The McLaren was just miles better on the long run. So if you look at the long run data as well, their degradation was better, their overall pace was better. Ugh. But doesn't take away from the fact that this is going to
Yeah,
be quite
but
interesting.
I don't know that it's going to be that straightforward, right?
Good,
Because
I'm glad you don't.
Oscar's going to have to deal. Well, but Oscar's going to have to deal with Max also, and so will Lando. Like this is not a breeze by, and I agree with you. The long run pace is there, but I also have to believe that the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, when they know that they can win, and also for Max keep the McLarens behind, candidly, because that's his got to be his immediate sort of focus beyond, of course, winning, which he would do anyway, want to do anyway. I don't think it's that easy, and I don't think it's
Yeah,
that simple. I
yeah,
don't. I mean, unless there's a mistake or something at the beginning,
yeah,
which is at the start, which could happen.
yeah,
It's 19 laps. It's not, I mean, these guys are
yeah.
champions, and they've got like 11 championships between them. Like that's crazy.
I guess what I worry about though is that there's so much toing and froing in the competitive order. I think Freddie Vasseur said this the best, right? That like the last four races of 2024, they had four different dominant winners, right? In Mexico, Ferrari were all over it. In Qatar, Red Bull, well, let's be honest, Max Verstappen was all over it. Um, and then we turned up in Las Vegas and Mercedes were all over it. And then finally in Abu Dhabi, we turned up and McLaren were all over it. And they were all very dominant in each of those races. What Freddie Vasseur is kind of saying is that, look, it's a lot to do with how your car handles the tyres. It's not about peak downforce or anything like that. It's about, on the day, the temperature, the wind, your aerodynamic map, how all of that interacts with the tyres and allows them to operate. That's what McLaren did in Melbourne, and
Well,
maybe a
I mean,
different team that has the magic source in China. We just don't know. And that, I think, is, when we talked to Kunal the other day, and he was talking about, look, I'm really excited about not knowing what's going to happen with each race. Well, this is the kind of thing that I think he was talking about, that you just don't know who's going to be right up there every race. And some people find that exciting. I kind of like having a bit of predictability in
yeah, but
that sense, but um, it's definitely thrown up a really fun grid for the sprint race tomorrow, and for that I can only be grateful. Sorry, I'm
I think
talking.
it's also early. No, it's early enough in the season where I think this will take a little bit of time to suss out, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's true.
look, there are four teams in the mix, and at some point, at least a couple of them, at least one of them will have to decide if it's worth kind of, and Mercedes will probably be the one, I would imagine, and Ferrari, if they really want to decide if they want to kind of, kind of pull back a little bit for this year and kind of look at next year, which I'm not suggesting will happen anytime soon. It might take up until race eight,
Sounding like
nine, when
George
that
Russell.
technical. I know, but it's not necessarily because McLaren are dominant. You just kind of have to wait and see how these things play out. Now, look, what we saw today was that being the quickest car didn't mean anything if you weren't in the right window, right? I mean, it did. And I recognize that we're splitting hairs there. And even Lando, who was on paper half a second behind, we know he isn't really that far
Yeah,
behind. I mean, at worst, he would have been, what, a thousand or a couple of hundreds there or thereabouts. So it's not like it's that far behind.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, I agree with you, and I think, and this is the thing that we need to caveat, is that McLaren really did chuck it away. If you listen to what Mark
correct.
Hughes had to say, their run plan in
It's really
SQ3
bad.
was awful. Because they did this push, cool down, push sequence. It meant that they were overweight when they had good tires because they had to run extra fuel, and then when they were
The right
lighter,
weight there.
they
Yeah, yeah.
had their tires were shot, so they never
Yeah.
got into the window where they could actually do anything. And I think they were
Well,
counting on the fact that they just had superior pace underlying to be able to do it, and they just didn't get that balance right.
which is that's the fascinating thing, right? We're
Mm.
all fixated on the fact that McLaren looked dominant, but we have yet to see a whole race actually play out in a way a race plays out under perfectly normal conditions. And I use that air quotes because Melbourne was in normal conditions.
Yeah,
It was rain, cold, hot, I mean, dry tires in 1 second. So we haven't seen that yet. So I would also like to reserve a little bit of judgment on how dominant McLaren will exactly be. The other factor is they do have two drivers who are going to compete with each other. And what we have seen on different occasions is that when two drivers go at it with each other, there's usually somebody behind who's going to benefit from it. And I think that there are so many variations and permutations that come into play, Max being the only one out there. And oh, by the way, Shez, we have to talk about this because this is now 2 weekends in a row. Liam Lawson put up a real dud again. And we're not just talking about a dud. Was he last on the grid? I think he was 19th or 20. Was he 20th? Oh goodness. I thought for a second he was 18th or 19th. But this is not I mean, how can we just let this go by? Because last year we were lamenting what Checo was doing, but this couldn't have been if you had thought about a worse situation, I don't think you could have come up with anything worse than this. Like, how is this happening? How can he be so far away? How so far apart? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, he might pull it back, but to be fair, Amar, we said this, didn't we? That like you're putting somebody who's had 11 races up against Max teammate killer Verstappen, when you've got a guy in the other racing bull who has 4 seasons worth of experience, has beaten pretty much every teammate he's had since Pierre Gasly, including the guy that you've put into the Red Bull seat. I think this was kind of coming, and yeah, fine, but maybe we need to give him a bit more time. But this is not a pattern that we haven't seen before, right? And
I mean, Gabriel Bortoleto put the steak sour in Q2 here. I mean, what are we talking about? I'm not suggesting he would be in the top five. I guess I'm not even suggesting he'd be in the top 10, which sounds a little bit crazy. I mean, you have Lance Stroll ahead of him. Like, what are you talking? No, no, no. This cannot. We're not asking for Liam to be like neck and neck and sort of fighting there like with the other, but this could not
Well,
work. And
he
this
was,
is
he was actually only 4 tenths off him in SQ1, right? So the gap.
and then
But okay, what I mean by that though is that when he was knocked out in SQ1, the actual gap wasn't that massive. It was 4 tenths. And remember how Helmut Marko was always going on about the magic 3 tenth gap that he needs from a teammate. The problem with that is that the grid is compressed now so much that 3-4 tenths is the entire grid now when it comes to qualifying. So it's tricky, but yeah, I'm not sure that they can give him a huge amount of time. And I hate to be the ones that said it, but we kind of told you so.
yeah, and I feel really bad for him because again, what Red Bull are doing is what they have done for the last few years, which is consistently destroy the career of their second driver. On the one hand, they can claim all glory because of what Max has done, and they sort of, I really am starting to believe more and more that, this is kind of the luck of the draw. You hit one Max Verstappen and one Sebastian Vettel, and then you sort of look around, and then you have Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Nick De Vries. You keep naming people, and then I'm afraid Liam Lawson is going to become just another name, and I cannot see him going to another team, much like what Alex was able to do with sort of resurrect his career and Pierre. But it is just crazy. Again, we're not talking about him being, anywhere near pole or even top five. You cannot get out of SQ1. That's pretty shameful. And I think this is a Red Bull issue more than Liam himself. But unfortunately, that's what's going to kind of get
Yeah,
wrapped in.
but I've said this before. Like, what are you going to do? Make the car slower? If you make the car slower, then they don't win any championships. This is the problem that McLaren were having, right? That one of the quotes that Lando Norris put up was that I actually don't find the 2025 McLaren particularly easy to drive. But what he said to the team is, look, just make the quickest car you can, and I'll work my way round that.
That's fair.
But that's what Max has been doing. He has been taking a car that is difficult to drive, and he has been just getting the absolute most out of it. And yes, it's his particular driving style that is able to exploit that. But there's no pressure, particularly on Red Bull, to improve that, to change the philosophy of the car. If Max continues to do that, it's on the other driver to try and come up to that level. But Red Bull have never employed a driver who seems to have the potential to be able to do that with the best will in the world. Even when they went out of the Red Bull driver pool, Checo was never sort of a top tier generational talent, right? If you put somebody like that in a car, then we'll know how much of this is just because Max is the only one that can drive that car. But I don't think you're going to be able to tempt anyone into that seat at the moment.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
But we'll have to wait and see what he does in the race.
Can we talk about some fun stuff? Because
Let's do it.
like I definitely don't want to bury the lead here. And Lewis Hamilton is box office news. Here he is on pole, and we're getting to him at 18 minutes into our video. Come on. I'm very happy. Can you tell?
It's a teaser. It's a teaser.
It's a teaser.
It's okay. You got to for all of you, all of our 1,300 plus subscribers, you got to work for it, man. We're not going to give it to you for free anymore. You got to go through. You got to eat your vegetables before you get to your meat and potatoes, man.
That's not true. Don't listen to him. You want more Lewis? We'll give you more Lewis. Look, after proper qualifying tomorrow, we'll put out another telemetry video. But we have had a little look at some of the lines and waves on the black screen for you, so you don't have to do it. And it's super interesting again. Remember, I was saying that what Lewis needed to do was be able to impose his own driving style on the car, because the car does seem to respond to it. Even if in Melbourne he was a little bit behind Charles using just his own style, what he seems to have done in China is he's taken on a little bit of what Charles was doing with that overlap. So into some of the bigger corners, so turn 6, which is the first corner in sector 2, where he was mighty, just by the way, into turn 6, into the final corners of sector 2, into the big stops before you get onto the long back straight. He's braking later than both Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, who is his closest competitor on the grid. But he's also keeping the throttle in a little bit longer than they are as well. So there's a cheeky little overlap between brake and throttle, which is not something he was doing in the Mercedes, but it is something that Charles is doing. I feel like he's learnt that, so he's keeping a higher minimum speed, but he's still managing to hit the throttle hard on exit, harder than I think Charles was doing last week. So it seems to me that certainly in China, and it may just be a China thing, that he's been able to meld the best bits of what Charles does with the best bits that he does, and it's made him impregnable. And yes, there was a bit of the car. If you look through the high speed sweeps of sector 2, where both Verstappen and Norris had to completely come out the throttle, there's Lewis still being able to pin the throttle as he's going through the second part of the sweepers. So there's a bit of the car in there able to maintain its tyres maybe with a bit more downforce, and that's helped him obviously. But the key thing for me is how he's able to meld those two things together. And I think if he can develop that and the car keeps responding, that is key. The car has to respond, which is something that it wasn't doing at Mercedes. I think we could be in for a fairly competitive season from our man Lewis. I don't think he's going to do this out qualifying his teammate by 0.2 every single weekend. It is still Charles Leclerc fastest on the grid over one lap that we're talking about, and he does have this magic overlap thing that he's been practicing his entire career. Lewis is just picking it up now, but I think that rather than all the doom and gloom that we've been talking about pre-season, this gives me a bit of hope. Not the time, but actually looking at the telemetry is quite interesting. Sorry, Ammar, I couldn't help myself.
No, I know you couldn't. I mean, and this is your day, man. We have to give you all the flowers and all the glory. This is why we're here today. I think you're absolutely right. And again, this is a matter of time, right? And I think this will be interesting both ways, right? I think we're sort of cheekily working around the Ferrari driver battle, but I think if these two drivers keep doing what and learning from each other, evidently, right? Race after race after, because I think it'll go both ways, right? They'll be learning both ways. And I think in the end, regardless of the outcomes here, I think what you had said in our last video, in our last video on Lewis, right, is that Lewis might be leaving Charles in a better place and the team in a better place when he is done, because Charles will get to learn a lot. And I think that this can only be a good thing for Ferrari. Certainly, I think, again, the fact that it's a sprint weekend, I am 100% confident that that gives Ferrari less time to screw it up. And I think Lewis imposed his will on them this weekend in trying to get the car to be more in tune with what he would like to see, as opposed to him taking their recommendations going into Melbourne. And I think simplicity is the key really for the team right now, because you do have a rocket ship in McLaren, and then Max is Max. So you're really looking for a top five sort of, juggling around here and there. And then George in Mercedes, we should give a shout out to him too, because
Oh
I have not,
please,
evidently, according to
let's.
your standards, and I've always said it's a TBD on George, and it still remains. And look,
But
say what you want.
he's TBDing, my friend. He is
He
TBDing.
is he is TBDing, and he had a great weekend in Melbourne, deserving of everything he did. He had a great lap in the sprint weekend as well. Oh, by the way, his teammate wasn't having a bad lap either until he had that one sort of tiny bit mistake too. So I think Mercedes are going to have a good season as well. I think what's pretty evident now is that they have come to the party, and now it's a question of will they decide to stick around long enough or bail and look at 26, which is what I'm not saying. George has said. Like, that's not my word. Before you guys come at me in the comments, like that, these are not my things. This is what he's saying. But I think it'll be pretty interesting if Mercedes are in the mix too. I personally would love to see Mercedes in the mix too, because I think it'd be fun to have four teams go at it, six drivers, possibly seven, if you really want to put Kimi Antonelli in it. It'd be kind of fun to see how it goes out. But it's a fun weekend, fun qualifying.
So I guess, and I agree with you. I would love to see all four teams, but in there. But and I guess this is why I have to come back at Kunal about what he said, right? So what I don't want to see is every single race as a different team that's dominant. It's just that we didn't realize that was the team that it was going to be. What I want is for all of them to be in there every single race, so that it's not by the end of qualifying or the end of free practice 2 who's going to be the dominant team that weekend. I want to know only in the last few laps of the race who's going to come out on top. That for me is what a championship in which all four teams are involved means. And I'm not sure that's what we're getting at the moment. It's not quite what we got at the end of 2024, even if it was unpredictable. And that for me, using your favourite phrase, Ammar, is what is TBD about this season upcoming. Yes, I might get in there. I've used one of your phrases. Trademark it right now.
No, this is your day, man. This is your day.
Right. Okay. Enough sprint qualifying news. We're gonna watch the sprint race, and we're gonna watch some qualifying. We'll have some more videos over the weekend. We'll try and come back at you with some instant reaction after the race. So stay around, stay tuned for that stuff. As usual, please like, please subscribe. We are starting to build a little community here, and I love to see it, because this is what we want, to bring in some chat, bring in your views, have you hate us, have you love us, just chat with us. That's what we want. So please leave us a comment. We will read every single one. We do every single video, and we respond to as many as we possibly can. We will see you guys in
Later.
the next one.